Hopefully that works. Give me a second. Yeah, it is. Right, okay. Well, we might get started. I think there are a few people that are still joining, but we will let them join because it's now 9 o'clock. So thank you very much for joining us this morning, myself and Sojan Joni from the Carbon Literacy Project. And as advertised, we are talking about how teams can, I think somebody's got their sound on. If they could just turn the sound off, please. Great, can't actually go back, here we go. Yes, so we're talking about how we engage our teams around sustainability and how we can make sure that teams are helping us deliver on the plans that are put in place. So what we're going to do is sort of a quick introduction to myself and Sojan, and then go into the content, and then we're going to leave plenty of time at the end. If you want to ask any questions, feel free to just put questions in the chat, or when we get there, just unmute yourself and chat. So without further ado, we'll crack on. So just very briefly, just about who I am and why we're doing this. So I'm the founder of Hattrick. We are a PR and thought leadership agency, or a comms agency, and also a certified B Corp. I'm actually one of the board trustees for the Carbon Literacy Trust, and also a certified carbon literacy training. And if you haven't heard of carbon literacy, that's one of the things that Sojan in particular is going to talk you through a bit later, what that is and how that works. So over to you, Sojan.
Thanks so much, Malin. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Really nice and sunny out here where I am. So just a quick introduction to myself. I am Sojan, and I work as the housing coordinator for the Carbon Literacy Project. I've got a background in built environment, so I've done my undergrad and master's in construction and civil engineering, and I initially started off my career as a site engineer in the Middle East. Now, above the project itself, so as Malin mentioned, I work for the Carbon Literacy Project. So we are a non-profit charity that's based in Manchester, and we support individuals and organizations to do a day's worth of learning about climate change. I will be giving a bit more information about what the training is all about, and yeah, what does it all include later on. But basically, it's around climate change education and spreading awareness and taking action against climate change. That's what's all around. So I'm happy to pass on to Malin now.
Great, thank you. So how do we then bring people with us on this journey? So as I said, sort of to start with, you may all have these plans in place and are struggling to get the teams around you engaged on that journey and help you deliver what you need to deliver as a business. And in fact, you're not on your own. So 42%, this is a survey by ED, the editorial magazine, and they found that 42% of business leaders said that engaging their teams is actually the biggest hurdle they have in terms of delivering on their sustainability strategies. And as I'm sure you're aware, there are so many businesses that are on this journey, and rightfully so, particularly, amongst the larger organizations. And the fact that they have set targets, etc., means that is sort of trickling down to, through the supply chain, putting pressure on other organizations to do the same. And as a result, 83% are making staff engagement the sort of top priority. And me and Sojan are going to just talk you through, some of the ways in which you can do that. And make sure that they understand it and they understand their role within what you're trying to do as an organization. But as a starting point, sorry. So then we have sort of three principles in terms of how we deliver this, and this is actually mirrored very nicely in the carbon literacy training. It's all about making it personal, so making sure that it's relevant to whoever you're speaking to. Whether that is, in this case, it's obviously in a business environment, but it's still, thinking about, what might make them engage more. The second thing then is about making it positive. As I'm sure you'll agree, there is a lot of negativity around sustainability in lots of different ways, and particularly at the moment, it feels like maybe, some of these issues have been maybe, sort of put on the back burner, or that they are being challenged, because of, what's happening more on a sort of macro global level. But in reality, we're still seeing, things progress in a really great way. So it's helping people see that and not feel hopeless. And the third point then is about making it practical. So making sure that teams understand, what they can do in a really sort of simple way, and how that can be implemented within their sort of day-to-day tasks, rather than feel like something that's separate, because that makes it really hard to engage on. But before we dive into sort of some of those tactics, I guess, I thought I'd start with looking at what are some of the things that are holding people back. Why are we not engaging with the conversation, and particularly around climate change? So there is it's a great TED talk, actually, and we can share that with you afterwards, from Per Espen-Stokes, and he's an economist and a behavioral economist, essentially. And he talks about sort of 5 key reasons why people don't engage. And the first one is distance, i.e. a lot of the conversation in this space is about things that are very far away, so they don't feel relevant to us. We talk about, polar bears and ice caps and, big events that are happening perhaps on the other side of the world, which, while we might care about it, it's not affecting us in the here and now. So it's really hard to engage with that. The second reason then is all the doom mongering in this space. And, it's easy to understand why, because it can feel like, what is happening is hard to watch. And, it's, looking at all the forecasts that come out, etc. They're not easy reading. However, it's not, generally speaking, a good way of motivating people, because we then shut down. There's only so much that we can take. Then dissonance is about, when we understand, what good would look like, perhaps. So we understand some of the things that we need to do, but our lives and the way that we are living sort of stand in the way a bit. So an example of that would be, for instance, we know that driving a petrol car or a diesel car isn't the best thing to do. And maybe on some of the shorter trips that we should walk or cycle or take public transport. However, in reality, we might not have, public transport around us that's functioning well. It might be, we all live busy lives, and in order to collect the kids or, go and see friends or, whatever it is, we have to use our car. Otherwise, we can't do the things that we want to do day to day, or the things that we have to do day to day. And that creates a dissonance. So we sort of ignore the things that we know that we sort of should be doing, because we have to get on with our lives. The fourth point then is about denial, and it's not necessarily that we're denying that it's happening. It's more about, more similar to the doom. So because there is, so much of this, around us and in the media, etc., we're sort of trying to shut that down in our minds, and sort of thinking that it can't be as bad as they're making out, etc., just because we can't take sort of any more information, or there is so much sort of negative information, or too much information perhaps, to understand. And then the final point is about identity. So, and this is where I think, certainly from my perspective, a lot of the hope lies in terms of motivating people. sort of both within an organization, but also, you know, on a sort of macro level. Because what the identity bit is talking about is how, you know, the fact that we are social animals and we behave like people around us. So actually, you know, whoever is first to start making changes, that's obviously quite a brave thing to do socially. However, quite often when that happens, you know, other people around us change because we want to be like people we surround ourselves with. For instance, there's loads of research to show that if you know, somebody in a neighborhood starts putting sort of changing to installing solar panels, for instance, loads of people follow suit because there is somebody close to us that's doing it and is working, etc. Somebody that we can identify with, and therefore that drives change. So I just think it's a really useful framework for understanding what stops people. And like I said, we will share it with you afterwards, because he then goes on to talking about like how you can flip that. And very briefly, you know, you sort of move from the distance to social. So thinking about, you know, what's going to motivate people, you know, instead of talking about things being, you know, being done for a environmental reason, you know, it's making it normal. So you might be that, you know, if we're talking about foods, like in this example, it's about being healthier rather than just going green. And doomed to being supportive, so helping people see that actually, and we'll come on to some of this in a bit more detail, you know, how does this benefit, you know, society in general, the health, you know, and sort of the planet. The dissonance is, so it's just making it really easy for people. So obviously in my example, I talked about the fact that, you know, we might be driving a fossil fuel car, and it's actually really difficult to change that because, you know, the infrastructure isn't there, etc. However, there are other things perhaps that we can do. So I really like this example. So if we're running events as a business, for instance, reducing the size of the plate at events is a really easy thing to do, and then people don't overload it, and, you know, there's loads of food waste at the end. Then denial to what he calls signals. So it's about demonstrating progress. So it's just helping people see how far they've come, because it can feel like, you know, that we're not doing enough, nobody's doing enough, and, you know, we can't quite remember where we started, so we don't quite know where we're at now either. And obviously as organizations, you know, we need to track these things anyway. But it's really important to do that on a sort of more individual level as well. So it doesn't feel like, you know, it's at that kind of big business level. It's more about what I'm doing individually. And then the final bit is about telling better stories. So helping people see the progress that's been made already, so sort of tied in with the signals one above. So you know, what's happening in organization, or what's happening outside the organization? What are the things maybe in your sector, or you know, or in the wider sort of business world that's happening already that people can get excited about and see actually they're managing to do X, Y, and Z and making great progress towards it, and then it feels like it's doable. So, and again, I will share this afterwards, and I'm just going to play a sort of short clip of this, but it's another TED Talk, and again, sort of reiterating those things around using plain and simple language, making it matter to people, and also making sure that, you know, when we're, you know, talking about it and trying to engage people, that they hear it from people that they can relate to, basically, or people like them. It's very long, so I'm just going to play a little clip from it.
To climate communications demands three simple things. The first one is plain, obvious, and universal language. One thing for sure, people don't readily get: carbon emissions, net zero, or most terms that can be found in a science book. And frankly, to the uninitiated, much of it doesn't really sound that bad. 2 degrees warmer in 50 years? Or it sounds so bad that you can't even get your head around it. 1.2 trillion tons of ice? confusion and hopelessness are the enemies of understanding. A good test for language is what pops into your head when you hear it. If you hear a term like climate change, what pops into your head? Well, for most people, the answer is not much. The language isn't vivid. What we need is vivid language that everyone gets. It's remarkable how many people actually confuse climate change with the ozone hole. More than 4 in 10 Americans think the ozone hole actually causes global warming. And so many of them remember and understand so much about ozone depletion. Why is that? Because it's a hole, it's a layer. People can see it, imagine it, relate to it. It uses simple metaphor that's an instant get. Here's a little story that gets a similar aha for climate change. Humans have been on Earth for about 300,000 years, but we've only started polluting like this in about the last 60. Our pollution stays in the air for thousands of years, creating a thickening blanket that traps heat in the atmosphere. That heat causes stronger hurricanes, bigger fires, more frequent floods, and the extinction of thousands of species. But there's good news. To stop the pollution blanket, we just have to stop polluting. This pollution blanket framing is one of the most effective we've tested at getting people to understand the issue.
So like I said, I'm just playing a sort of brief clip of that, but, sort of just demonstrating how, trying to simplify the language, whether you like, his analogy there or not, but, trying to make it a bit more relatable for people so that it doesn't feel like so big and sort of drowning in acronyms, etc., which is easy in this space. So the next bit then is about making it a bit more personal. So the first thing then is, not talking about the fact that we're saving the planet, and I recognize this is done in a business environment as well. But it's important to think about how we frame it. And in this case, this is the quote from Barack Obama even. Talking about the fact that we are the first generation to feel the impact of climate change, but also the last generation that can do something about it. And there's lots of research to show that, making it personal and making it feel, us feel like we can do something, but also that we're doing it for, the people that we love, maybe we've got children or, we're working with people who are younger, we're wanting them to have a livable future, basically. So sort of moving away from talking about, the planet and thinking about it from a different perspective. And I just thought this was quite an interesting one in terms of we've got Easter coming up. And it's helping people understand the link between things. So there's obviously a lot of, talk around going back to what we talked about before in terms of the distance, things are happening far away, they don't matter that much to us. However, the fact that, the cocoa bean crops are, failing in lots of regions in the world. And that is part of the reason then that the price of chocolate is going up. And that's something that we, that we're all going to see, in our pockets in the next couple of weeks or so. So trying to tie, to bring it back to things that we understand and care about. And then the picture at the top left is, in short, it's a flooded football pitch. Going back to one of the storms that we had over the winter, and the other one is just showing flash flooding unseasonally in the Canaries, where a lot of people might be going on holiday. So it's just tying it back to things that genuinely matter to the people that we're talking to, so that they can engage with it. But also then thinking about it more from a business perspective and sort of keeping it positive as well, is helping them see that actually there are huge opportunities in this space. It's not just about, caring, going back to the original point about, it's not just about caring about the environment. Actually, the net zero economy is booming. The green sector is growing at 3 times the rate of the UK economy, which is incredible. And it's not, that widely talked about, has been covered in the media. And this is from the CBI, the Confederation of British Industries. So, again, it's coming from business, and it's about business, and it's helping people see that connection and making feel like, they can be part of something that's actually exciting and going somewhere, especially at the moment when there's so much talk about the opposite, I guess, particularly in the media. And actually, this is a piece of research from LinkedIn from just at the end of last year, looking at green skills. So essentially what they're saying is that we actually need to double the green talent pool by 2050 to keep up with demand. And obviously from, in terms of engaging your team, having these skills is going to make you more attractive, both to you as an organization, but also as individuals. And you can see this, it's a really interesting report, actually. And we'll share a link to the report so you can have a look at all of it. And you can see there on the right, the types of industries where the demand is particularly high. And the report is both global and, and then looks at specific countries, including the UK. So I think it's a really interesting study. And it's also an annual one, and the demand keeps growing, inevitably. So then looking more specifically then at how do we make it more positive and make people feel like it's something that they can do and can lean into. And the first thing around this is looking at perceptions. So this was a global survey of 80,000 people across the world who were asked the question, would you be willing to give 1% of your income to tackle climate change? And there's quite a lot of people on this call, so normally we would do a quick poll, but in short, generally speaking, people's guesses are that this is relatively low. The actual figure is 69% that thought that said yes, that they would be willing to give 1% to tackle climate change, which is usually quite surprising. And then asking them the other question in terms of, how do they think that other people in their country would respond to the same question, i.e. their friends, their family, their peers, etc. The figure was considerably lower. And that's for good reason, and sort of a couple of reasons for that. The first one is that as people, we generally speaking think that we are more likely to do something than other people are, particularly in this type of space. And the second reason, which feels really pertinent at the moment, is that the media isn't painting a very positive picture. Nor is social media. It's very sort of binary. It's us against them. It's yes and no. Because that ultimately what sells, that's interesting. We're drawn to those kind of contrasts, but the reality is not like that at all. In reality, we have much more in common with people than not, and we actually agree more than people around us than not. So I just think it's a really interesting piece of research, and interesting to understand some of those things behind it, particularly when it can feel so negative as it might do at the moment, and is helping people see this in general. And then the other side of this, of course, is how fast things are changing. So the graph on the left is actually the number of people who've been trained as carbon literate, and we're using that because it's sort of a positive hockey stick, if you've heard of that, or the fact that we're having exponential change here. Things are happening very, very fast. Quite slow to start with, and then it just takes off. And this is what we're seeing, with a lot of things in general. People normally associated with technology and digital, say. If we look at in 2024, there were hardly any smartphones. By 2004, there were hardly any smartphones. By 2024, there were 6 billion users across the world. The same with social media. We've gone from millions to billions. And this is now happening in the sort of green space, as we call it. So solar power is now over 90% cheaper than it was in 2000. And you're starting to see very similar trends, both for solar and wind adaptation, as well as EVs. So, this is how change happens. It's a bit slow first, and then, it grows exponentially. And I think that the parallel with digital is quite an interesting one, because it's, this space has become quite political. And I think the digital space isn't in the same way. So using those parallels are quite useful, I think, in terms of how things are changing. It feels less threatening maybe to talk about. And then just to give you one example of a business, making things happen. So you may or may not know that concrete is a huge issue in terms of emissions. And 8%, they're actually 8% of the global emissions, which is massive. And particularly then considering that there is a huge building boom across the world, because, as a collective community, global community, we are more and more people are moving to the city. There's a huge urbanization going on, and part of that is building more, and obviously concrete is a extremely common material, and then there is this company in the northeast of the UK called Low Carbon Materials. They were shortlisted for the very first Earthshot prize, and they are working with a lot of the big players to decarbonize concrete, which would transform how we build, certainly from an environmental perspective. So that's just one example. And then the other thing then, in terms of helping people see how how they can make an impact, and how we all have a role to play, is that it only takes 20% of people to take a stand or to start making changes to drive large scale change. So relating that back to your team, starting with a small group of people who might be naturally engaged, and sort of making sure that you have people representing different areas of the organization, is a great way of sort of starting that ball rolling, and making sure that you're engaging people across the organization. Then the final point then is about making it practical. So just use this, because I know that you're sort of, in terms of people in this webinar, you're from sort of different areas and different organizations. So we're just using, more personal examples here, but helping people see, what the big ticket items are in terms of driving change. And they might not all be obviously climate related. There are obviously lots of other issues in the sustainability space, but being really and directive around what they can do is important. So this is part of the course that we deliver in terms of the carbon literacy training, and helping people understand, for instance, that I think most people know about buying green energy and switching from petrol or diesel cars to electric, etc., because there's been a lot of conversation around that. But lots of people don't realize that actually changing your diet is still a high impact action. And they might have heard also sort of seen the switch towards plant-based foods, etc., but not aware that that can make such a big difference. And I think most people also overestimate the impact of recycling, and that obviously that applies both business-wise and depending on what you do, obviously, and personally. Yes, of course, it's definitely something that we should be doing, but it's not a sort of a tick in the box, sort of full stop. If you only do that, that's only sort of a moderate impact. So it's just helping people see that the kind of things that would have the greatest impact. And walking them through that and helping them sort of pick something, lower hanging fruit that's easy to implement to get started, but still feel like they're making, they're making an impact and tracking that. So, like I said, the high impact thing from a personal level then, so, transport is huge, energy is huge, but also diet. And then not getting too hung up on recycling, depending, from a business perspective, obviously depends on what you do. But so just some ideas there. And then again, thinking about it, from an individual's point of view, and then helping them see the difference they're making. There are loads of different tools. So there is a website called Geeky, and from a personal perspective, it's free access, and it's absolutely fantastic. You create a little profile, you can measure your carbon footprint, and it gives you ideas, loads and loads of ideas every day for the kind of things that you can do. So it can be really, encouraging and really useful in terms of helping us see what steps we can take. But they also have a business version that can gamify it within the organization and helping you see pitching teams against each other and having a bit of like I said, internal competition to make it a bit more interesting potentially. Then there are things like obviously switching your search engine to Ecosia, for instance, and they donate. Also, they plant trees, when you browse, and then using apps. I've just picked Olio here, but there are lots of different apps that can help. Lesser the environmental impact, and Olio can be used from a business perspective as well. So when you have food left over at events, etc., it's a good way of making it available to other people, so you're not throwing it away at the end. Great. So those were sorry, somebody's just entered. So those were the three principles that we're talking about in terms of how to engage people. So making it more personal to people, to make it feel like it matters to them, and help people understand, what role they have in this. Making it positive, so making sure that we move away from, too much doom mongering, both within the organization, but also on a sort of macro level, and helping people see, what progress is being made and the role they can play within it. And then the final point, then practical, like what can they do in the here and now, and help them be part of working that out. It's a great way of engaging. So I hope that's useful. Sojan's going to just tell you a little bit about carbon literacy training. So our course is called a Net Zero Masterclass. And he's just going to talk you through what carbon literacy is, and then we're open to any questions. Over to you, Sojan.
Thank you so much, Malin. That's super helpful. Again, hi everyone, good morning. So just to give you a brief about the training and just interlinking everything that we were discussing about right now. So carbon literacy training is always a day's worth of learning about climate change. So the training, we would say, is about 7 to 8 hours long, but it's built on a very flexible and adaptive framework that's called the carbon literacy standard. So you could basically deliver the training in a single day, in 2 half-day sessions, or in even smaller bite-sized sessions, like 2-hour sessions in over a month. So it's completely flexible and up to you. Now, why carbon literacy training, or what are the benefits? Now, it's interlinking everything that we mentioned about. So the training basically helps you understand the basics of climate change. So it's nothing complicated. It's not astrophysics or rocket science. It's very basic stuff that we need to know about climate change. So what's greenhouse gases? Now, what are the impacts that we're facing because of climate change? And the training is created in such a way that we focus on local impacts rather than seeing things happening around the world. We want to look at local impacts. For example, if a training is happening in Manchester, in your locality, what were the recent impacts that we've all gone through, or the flooding impacts, the heat effects, etc. So we look into that. Then we slowly start looking into the policy bits. What are the policies around? What are the UK net zero targets? What are all of that? As most of us work in an organization or could be self-employed, we come across a lot of sustainability reports, targets. What is all this got to do for me? I don't really understand. So helping you understand the basics around that. So what's ESG? Yeah, why is it relevant? What are scopes? Scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, carbon footprint, carbon handprint, so many different terms floating around. So the training helps you understand all of these basic terms and definitions, how it all interrelates to your day-to-day activities, and then we slowly start looking into what steps or what can I do to reduce my own carbon footprint? How can I communicate this positively to others? And what makes the training even more better is that at the end of the training, it's not something where someone just delivers the training, you attend it, and you just go back. No, it's not that way. So you attend the training, lots of activities and discussions helping you figure out, okay, what are the different things I can do as an individual, or I can do within my workspace to reduce our collective carbon footprint. And then also at the end of the training, there is an evidence form that every learner would need to fill. So where every learner would be committing to an individual and a group action. Now, it's not something we want learners to continue committing to. So, as part of the training, once they do the training, once they acquire all the knowledge, we want learners to come up with new and impactful actions that they could do in their personal space, in their workplace, etc., and commit to them, write it, and yeah, then we have a dedicated certification team that certifies every individual as carbon literate. So it is focused on individuals, communities, within educational spaces. It's carbon literacy training is for everyone. Now, one of the major things we focus on is peer-to-peer delivery, and the reason for that is because there is an element of trust, and also at the same time the trainer would know more about what's happening within the sector or within their organization, and they would be able to communicate more about that. So, for example, if let's say the training is being delivered in a construction space, if it's an engineer or someone who works within the space delivering the training, he or she would be able to explain more about their carbon footprints, where does it lie, what impacts do they have, how can we reduce, maybe focusing on the materials of construction they use. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that everyone could be indulged and could have a lot more meaningful conversations. So the peer-to-peer element is really important and effective. And also the training, there is a lot of flexible ways you can deliver the training and even with the materials. So as an organization, we are an accreditation body, so we don't deliver any training ourselves. Instead, we provide materials, like for example, pre-accredited materials, if you fall within one of our toolkit sectors, to use to deliver training internally, or if you're an organization that doesn't fall into one of our sector courses, you could always create a course. And by creating, you could make it as bespoke as you want for the audience you want to deliver the training to. So, for example, if you are an organization who does retrofits, you could create a carbon literacy course that contains all the basic science, whatever I had discussed about, and include things about retrofitting. What does it do? What are the different frameworks? For example, past 2035, looking into that, the different standards, and then helping learners to understand what are the actions we can take in that space to reduce our own footprint. So, as an organization, you could create your course, and there is lots of support. For example, Hattrick, they've got like a built environment course that they deliver for learners within the built environment sector. Also, they deliver training specific to businesses as well to help them understand the basics of climate change. Now, just a personal story from my end. Like I did mention in the beginning, I had a completely different career. I was working as a site engineer, and then came to the UK to do my master's. It was during my master's I did carbon literacy training. So it was 2 hour chunks done over a period of a month, and it helped me realize things that I never thought about. For example, I've never had a look into my carbon footprint, my own carbon footprint, or what activities do I do that has a massive impact on my in my personal space, my meat consumption or the way I travel. it was an eye-opener for me. And I believe it's going to be the same for a lot of the people as well who joined the call today. So it's about realizing what are the actions you do, what impact it has, and then what can I do to reduce, or what action can I take to be part of that and reduce our footprint collectively. So yeah, again, it's the behavioral change impact there that helps one understand and take action. So there's lots of different ways you can deliver training. As I said, if you fall into one of the sectors where we have a toolkit course, like for example, we have toolkit courses for social housing providers, we have for the NHS, we have a toolkit course that could be used to roll out training within the NHS, within local authorities, in universities, colleges, um, civil service. So there's lots of toolkit courses out there. So if you fall in one or under one of them, you could definitely use them to deliver training. Otherwise, you could either create a course, and now you wouldn't be alone in this journey. So if you've got the in-house capacity, well and good, you can create your course, get it accredited against a competency standard, and start delivering training internally. Or else you could take expertise from Marlin or colleagues in Hattrick or other training providers who would be happy to support you in that journey, create a course, get it accredited, and then deliver training. So yeah, so you could, and it's very simple to get started on the journey. There's only two requirements for anyone to start delivering carbon literacy training. So anyone can be a trainer. One is to be certified carbon literate yourself, which means you must have attended a training and been certified. And the second requirement is to have attended a 1.5 hour webinar that our trainer network team runs. It's called the Delivering Successful Carbon Literacy Session. Now, it's just a very simple webinar that explains the processes that you would need to know as a trainer to start delivering sessions. So what are the background processes involved? What makes a good action? The carbon literacy standard itself. And yeah, so it just summarizes everything in a nutshell and gives you all that information. And again, there is, as an accreditation body, there's various different pathways you could. So for individuals, you could attend a competency training session, get yourself certified, and that's a pathway for individuals. Now there's a pathway for organizations, which means organizations where the carbon literate learners can be found. The organization itself can benefit from an accreditation called Carbon Literate Organization Awards. Now, it's a really nice way to showcase your commitment to the training as well as the wider work you're doing to tackle climate change and impart the climate knowledge. There is an accreditation pathway for trainers. So if you're in a trainer journey, there is various trainer accreditations that you could benefit from. There's also accreditation for training organizations. So there's lots of different things as a project that we would offer. Marlon, could you please get it on to the next slide, please? Amazing. Now, these are very, very few examples. So just to give you a perspective of how the training is. So over 125,000 learners have been certified as carbon literate. And yeah, if I'm not wrong, we do have an infographics which we usually show, but about 8,000 organizations have already engaged with us with over 850 courses, carbon literacy courses. And those 850 courses are in 16 or more different sectors that's been used to deliver training internally and externally to colleagues. So yeah, it's been used, for example, as active training happening in Australia, in Korea, in Africa, so all various different continents, and again, for different audiences as well. So within universities, for communities, within your workplaces. So yeah, there's lots of training happening, and a few example I can give of really good internal cascade we've seen is one of the biggest was from environmental agency themselves, because they created their own course. They started slowly the training rollout, and they trained over 8,000 staff members in carbon literacy training because they identified the importance of understanding the language and the impacts that climate change have and how it all links to our decision making. And then another wonderful cascade we've seen recently was from Transport for London. They've delivered training to over 3,500 learners in a single year. That was last year. And they were also awarded the Catalyst Award as well for the wonderful cascade that they've run. I think they've got over 70, 75 trainers who quickly took on the task of, oh, this seems interesting. We want to, yeah, get cracking on with this, impart the knowledge. So there's a lot of organizations who've done that. Now, particularly, I'll let Marlin speak about Axter and Bowder and how it all kickstarted from what Hattrick did as well. So I'll pass on to Marlin.
Oh, thank you. So just very, very briefly, so we worked with, both those organizations are actually roofing companies. And AXA has actually, we've just helped them build a course for roofing fitters. So that's the most specific audience, I think, certainly that we have trained, or that we have helped train. So we've basically created a whole course for them to roll out internally. So we're not going to be delivering it. They're delivering it themselves and helping roofing fitters understand, why it matters to them, and what they can do in their day-to-day job to reduce their environmental footprint. Which has been quite a challenging audience, because obviously they're quite different. It's had to be quite hands-on, but it's been a really interesting challenge, and really proud to have been working with them. And Axter is, they are a CLO, so carbon literate organization, silver, going for gold, and Bowder is I think bronze at the moment. So just as an example of what other organizations are doing. So we've got one question in there from Danielle saying, once I'm trained, can I train my colleagues at work after that? So I think you've answered that in part, Sojan, already, haven't you?
Yeah. So Daniel, yes, you can deliver training internally to your colleagues. So the major requirement is that you would need to have a suitable course for your audience. Now, Danny, if you'd like to turn on your microphone and if you want to ask the question or just want to chip in, that'd be really nice as well. But you just need to have a suitable course for your audience. Now, if it's something that you would need to create, there is a lot of resources that's available. You can create your own course by yourself or with the help of an external training provider, get it accredited, and then start delivering training internally to your colleagues or even externally as well. So it's completely up to you as long as the course fits for the audience. And as I mentioned, there's only 2 requirements for anyone to start delivering training. It's one, to be certified carbon literate, and the other is to have attended a delivering successful carbon literacy session.
Oh, and that's all right, Danielle. Hopefully that was helpful, and if not, you can just drop us a note later. And then another question that we've had then is sort of how long does it take to get a course accredited then if you create your course?
So the criteria checking process, we have a dedicated team of criteria checkers who work to make sure that every course submission meets the carbon literacy standard. Now, the ideal process we would say is it takes about 3 to 4 weeks for our team to get back to you with feedback. So how it would work is either you would be accessing our course kit. So that's a pool of resources that you could use to start creating your own course. You would put in all the materials, make sure that it fits the standard, it fits all the requirements, all the topics that you want to be seen in the training. Make sure that, again, it ticks all the boxes. There is a criteria checker form that you would be filling, just explaining how each of the standards have been met. So for example, the knowledge bit, is there a slide around greenhouse gases, or how are the values of this section being satisfied? So you would be evidencing all of that in a form, and you would be submitting your form and this criteria check with your slide deck and your criteria checker form to our team, dedicated team. And it takes about 3 to 4 weeks, I would say, roughly, for them to get back to you with feedback. Now, it's a very simple process where they would either get back to you with feedback saying, oh, the course looks really nice. You could make additional small amendments here and there, but that's completely okay. You get it accredited, you could start delivering training with it. Or else they might come back to you with feedback saying you could add in, or maybe you could swap these resources with so and so slides, or maybe make it a bit more bespoke in certain sections and give you that feedback. So you would take that back, make those changes, and submit it again. But it'll be a really quick process after that. Once you've been assigned a criteria checker, it's a really quick process, and that's how usually it takes. So about 3 to 4 weeks, I would say, shortly.
Right, then we have another question. So any advice on how to get senior leadership buy-in so that funds and time available to provide carbon literacy training for staff. Well, we've found that the best way of doing that is getting somebody in the senior leadership team trained. So, people like ourselves and other people, other trainers deliver open courses, as we call them, that anybody can, sign up to and join. And it's interesting because we find that the conversion rate from that is really high, as in once you've done the training, it's really easy to see how useful it would be, for the organization. Particularly, I think, from a leadership perspective, the fact that everybody comes away with an action plan. So, literally, you're going to go from having your sustainability targets, up there, to having an action plan, each individual having an action plan for how they're going to help the organization deliver on that, or it's at least start, making a start on that and engaging in it. And in fact, just sort of anecdotally, people that, when we've gone in and trained entire teams, one of the more interesting feedback, generally speaking, is that they've gone from a place where they're struggling to get people engaged to a place where the team is asking, like, all right, what's next? They're basically pushing, the sustainability team or the leadership team to go further, to go faster, to allow them to help drive the way forward. So that's what I would suggest. And then also, the leadership team would be like anybody is thinking about those principles that we've talked about today. So thinking about, what are the things that they are sort of personally or professionally engaged in, how can you, what are the, things that you can pull on to get them excited about it? Is it, the fact that the net zero economy is growing faster, and that is something that, you want to be part of? Is it, about, like I said, the fact that they feel like the organization is stuck, that, you have these plans in place, but nothing is happening. So just thinking, carefully about, who the person is that you need to convince, and the kind of messages that you can use for them in a convincing way. And then, like I said, trying to keep it positive, because there is so much negativity in this space, and rightfully so. There's a lot of challenge. We have a lot of challenges in this space, but ultimately, things are happening and it's moving forward, and it's trying to keep trying to sell it from a positive perspective rather than a negative. I hope that helps. Any other questions? I guess one question that we have had in, and that we always get, is how much does it cost? How much does it cost to train the team? So obviously there's some cost from carbon literacy perspective, and then obviously from trainers. So do you want to go first, Sojan?
So yeah, thanks, Malin. So just a quick one on that. So the main cost, I would say, is one would be accessing the materials. So if you fall under one of our toolkit sectors, you would be able to access one of the toolkit courses, and there's a license fee that you would be paying for that. Now, if you don't fall under one of the sectors, if you would be creating your own course, then there is a course accreditation fees. Now, that would be a one-time fee to get your course accredited, and that you could use that course anytime you deliver training internally or externally. So there is a course accreditation fee that you would need to be aware of. And then the other fee is the certification cost. Now, the certification cost, as I did mention, since every learner at the end of the training would be completing an evidence form, committing to actions, and we certify them as carbon literate. So there is a fee for the certification process itself, and it's on a sliding scale from £10 to £30 per application, and that depends upon the annual turnover of the recipient organization. So for example, if it's a community group who's receiving the training, it would be £10. Yeah, the application would be capped at £10, for example. If an organization where there's internal training being rolled out, and let's assume that their turnover is between 5 million to 100 million, they would be paying £20 towards a certification and 30 for the higher bracket. So those are the main two costs that as an individual you would need to be aware of. One is the course accreditation fee, and the other would be your certification fee.
Yes, and then obviously if you then sign up to, one of the open courses, for instance, it just depends on the provider, because, we're all sort of independent trainers. Our course is 160 plus VAT, and we run the course every month. And if it's a bespoke course, like I said, we do those as well, help businesses create their own. It's quoted on a, based on, what industry you're in and what you're asking for or what you're looking for, etc. And we also go into organizations and, train entire teams. And the same rule applies. We basically quote depending on, where you are and what you're looking for and what kind of sector you're in. And if you'd like to have more information, we just put our contact details on there. So I don't know if there are any other questions before we start wrapping up, because it's nearly 10 o'clock now. No? No, that's great.
Silence.
Excellent. Right, okay, well, I hope that was useful. And like I said, just drop us a line if you've got any other questions or any other thoughts. And thank you so much for coming today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Have a nice day.